Get out of my way, you useless girl!
Jesus.
Stand up and clean those clothes.
The morning it happened, I was carrying a tray of freshly ironed clothes up the back staircase of the Okafor compound. The same staircase I had climbed every single day for 6 years. 6 years. 6 years of waking up before the sun opened its eyes. 6 years of sweeping, cooking, fetching water, scrubbing pots, braiding hair, washing underwear that was not mine, and swallowing my own tears like medicine. 6 years of being called the girl from nowhere. My name is Ada, but inside that compound, nobody called me that. They called me, Ada, come here, or Ada, are you stupid? Or simply nothing. A snap of fingers, a clap of hands, a hiss. Because to them, I was nothing. I was 16 when my mother died of a fever that came in the night and never left. She left me with nothing but a raffia sleeping mat, a small Bible with torn pages, and the name of her distant cousin, Mama Rose, who lived in the big zinc-roofed compound at the far end of Okrika Street. I carried those 3 things on my back and walked 4 hours under a punishing sun to reach her gate. Mama Rose opened it, looked me up and down the way a butcher looks at a goat, and said, "You can stay, but you will walk." I nodded. My eyes were red and dry from crying. I had nowhere else to go. I did not know that her words, "you will walk," were not just a condition, they were a life sentence. Her daughter, Sandra, was my age. Same height, same dark skin, almost. But the similarity ended there. Sandra wore slippers that cost more than everything I owned. She spoke to me the way one speaks to an animal, not always with cruelty, but always with the quiet, easy confidence of someone who knows they are better than you. And in that compound, everybody agreed with her. Sandra had 2 friends who visited every weekend, Precious and Shoma. Those 3 girls were a kind of poison. Separately, each one was bearable, but together they became something wicked. They would sit on the veranda eating chin-chin and drinking cold Fanta, watching me sweep the compound in the afternoon heat. They would laugh, they would point, they would say things just loud enough for me to hear. "Sandra, is that your house girl? She has no shape, oh. Her hair is like a dried broom. If I were her, I would have died of shame by now." I learned to keep my face still. I learned to make my eyes empty. I learned to lock whatever was breaking inside me behind a door deep in my chest and swallow the key. Because the moment I cried, Mama Rose would say I was being dramatic. The moment I answered back, Mama Rose would say I was ungrateful. And the moment I was ungrateful, I would have nowhere to sleep. So I stayed quiet, I stayed small, I stayed invisible. That was my mistake. Because people who see you staying quiet for too long begin to believe that you cannot feel pain. They begin to test you. They begin to push further and further until one day they push too far. That Saturday morning, I was climbing the back stairs with a tray of freshly ironed clothes balanced in both hands. The staircase was narrow and steep, with 12 steps and a concrete floor at the bottom. I had climbed it 1,000 times. I heard footsteps behind me, fast ones. I turned just enough to see Sandra's face, and what I saw there was not anger. It was not even cruelty. It was excitement. She pushed me. 2 hands, flat on my back with full force. The tray flew, the clothes scattered, and I fell, all 12 steps, hitting my shoulder, my hip, my head, until the concrete floor at the bottom swallowed me whole. The last thing I heard before darkness took me was Sandra's voice floating down from the top of the stairs, calm and almost bored. "Clean those clothes before Mommy comes back." I do not know how long I lay on that cold floor. What I know is that when I opened my eyes, the light had shifted. The afternoon sun was pouring through the small window near the back door, and my whole left side felt like it had been set on fire and stamped out with a boot. My shoulder throbbed, my hip screamed. There was something warm and wet above my left ear, and when I touched it with my fingers and looked, My hand came back red. I was bleeding. I laid there, alone, on the floor of that compound, and I made a sound I had never made before in my life. Not a cry exactly, not a scream. It was something lower than both, something that came from a place inside you that you do not even know exists until everything else has been broken open. Nobody came. I could hear music playing upstairs. Sandra and her friends were laughing. Someone was singing along to a song on the radio. Life continued above my head as though I were not bleeding on the floor beneath their feet. I pulled myself up. It took a long time. My left arm would not cooperate fully, and every time I tried to push up from the floor, my shoulder sent white pain shooting all the way to my teeth. But I got up. Because what else do? You get up, that is all. You simply get up. I cleaned the blood from my head with a piece of old cloth from the laundry pile. I gathered Sandra's scattered clothes from the staircase, checked each one for stains, and took them back upstairs. My hands were shaking, my legs were shaking, but I carried those clothes back up those same 12 steps. And when I knocked on Sandra's door and laid the clothes on her bed, she did not even look at me. She was sitting at her dressing table, painting her nails, surrounded by Precious and Chioma. The room smelled of nail polish and hairspray, and the particular sweetness of girls who have never known hunger. "You took forever," Sandra said, still looking at her nails. I said nothing. I turned and walked out. That night, lying on my mat in the small storeroom they had given me as a bedroom, a room that smelled of old onions and damp wood, I stared at the ceiling and I asked God a question I had been holding for a long time. How long? How long do I carry this? How long do I bleed for people who do not see me as human? How long do I swallow pain and serve people who would step over my body to get to their Fanta? No answer came that night. Just the sound of the ceiling fan upstairs in Sandra's room, turning and turning, cooling people who deserved it less than I did. But something shifted in me that night, something quiet and dangerous. Not anger exactly. Anger is hot and loud and it burns out quickly. What shifted in me was colder than anger. It was decision. I decided I was not going to die in that compound. I decided that one day, not today, not tomorrow, but one day, I was going to leave that place. And when I left, I was not going to leave empty. I was going to take something with me. What that something was, I did not yet know, but the decision itself was enough to get me through the night. The next morning, something happened that changed everything. An old woman knocked on the compound gate. Her name was Mama Ezine. She was short and round, the kind of old that does not look frail, but instead looks solid, like a tree that has survived too many storms to be moved by wind. She wore a plain wrapper and a white blouse, and she carried a small raffia bag over one shoulder. Her eyes were the kind of eyes that look at you and see things you have not said. She said she was looking for a young woman to help her in her shop, a fabric shop 3 streets away. She had heard from someone who had heard from someone that Mama Rose's compound had a hard-working girl. Mama Rose was sitting on the veranda when the old woman arrived. I watched from the corner of my eye as Mama Rose smiled her big fake market smile and said, "Yes, I have a very reliable girl. She can come help you on market days." What Mama Rose did not say was that she intended to collect my wages herself. But I did not care about that, not yet, because when Mama Ezine turned and looked at me, really looked at me, she paused. Her eyes dropped to the bruise above my left ear that I had tried to cover with the edge of my headscarf. Her eyes moved to my shoulder, the one I was holding slightly lower than the other because it still ached. She looked at my hands, rough, cracked, the hands of someone who walks without rest. And then she did something nobody in that compound had ever done. She smiled at me. Not the smile you give someone beneath you, the smile you give someone you recognize. "What is your name, my daughter?" she asked. My throat tightened. It had been so long since someone called me daughter. "Ada," I said. "Ada," she repeated, as though tasting the name, checking its weight. "Good name, strong name." She told me to come to her shop the following Monday. I counted the days. That Monday, I walked into Mama Izine's fabric shop and I felt something enter my chest that I had almost forgotten. Hope. Small hope, the size of a seed, but a seed is enough. The shop was full of color. Ankara prints, lace, osoke, George fabric, bolts and bolts of it, stacked floor to ceiling, smelling of newness. Mama Izine taught me how to measure with a tape, how to fold fabric without creasing it, how to speak to customers in a way that made them feel valued. She was patient. She did not shout. She did not snap her fingers. She talked to me like I had a brain. Within 3 weeks, I knew every fabric in that shop by name and price. Within 6 weeks, I was handling customers alone while Mama Izine rested in the back room. She watched me from behind the curtain sometimes, and I could feel her approval like warmth on my back. One evening, as I was closing the shop, she called me and sat me down. "Ada," she said, "who beat you before you came here?" I froze. She waited. She did not push, she just waited, the way deep water waits. And then, for the first time since my mother died, I opened that locked door in my chest, and everything I had swallowed for 6 years came flooding out. I told her everything. The staircase, Sandra's hands on my back, the blood on the floor, the ironed clothes, the silence, all of it. When she finished, Mama Izine was quiet for a long time. Then she said 7 words that rearranged my entire life. "Then it is time you learnt to sew." If this story is already grabbing your soul, you have not even reached the best part yet. Subscribe to this channel right now and turn on your notifications, because what happens next will leave your mouth open. Sewing, I discovered, is not just about fabric and thread. It is about patience. It is about vision. The ability to look at a flat, shapeless piece of cloth and see in your mind the finished thing it will become. Mama Izine had a sewing machine at the back of the shop, an old butterfly brand with gold lettering, the kind that roars like a small engine when it runs. She sat me in front of it on a Tuesday morning and said, "Touch it. Do not be afraid of it." I was afraid of it. The machine looked complicated. The needle was sharp and fast and unforgiving. But I touched it, and then I sat at it, and then I began. I was terrible at first. My seams were crooked. My stitches were uneven. I broke 2 needles in the first week. Mama Izine would look at my work, say "again," and walk away. No insults, no sighing, just again. So I did it again, and again, and again, until. At night, back in that onion-smelling room in Mama Rosie's compound, I practiced in my mind. I closed my eyes and I sewed. I saw the fabric. I felt the tension of the thread. I heard the rhythm of the machine. I stitched in my sleep. Within 2 months, my seams were straight. Within 4 months, Mama Izine trusted me to cut expensive fabric. Within 6 months, I sewed my first complete dress, a simple Ankara gown with cap sleeves and a flared hem. Mama Izine put it on the mannequin at the front of the shop. A woman walked in that same afternoon, pointed at it, and bought it. I stood in the back room and pressed both hands to my mouth so nobody would hear me cry. That was the day I understood something powerful. A skill is the one thing nobody can push down a staircase. They could take my sleep, they could take my wages, they could take my dignity in 100 small ways every single day, but they could not reach inside my hands and remove what I was learning. I started saving money, small amounts, hiding coins in a cloth pouch sewn inside my wrapper. Mama Ezine began paying me directly, quietly, telling Mama Rose less and less of the truth. She was not cheating, she was protecting. There is a difference. A year passed, then another. By the time I was 20, I could sew anything. Bridal gowns, suits, school uniforms, senator wears, lace asoebi that made women weep at their own beauty. Mama Ezine began introducing me to her customers not as her helper, but as my Ada, the one who made this dress you are wearing. My name. She gave me back my name. But the compound had not changed. Mama Rose still pocketed most of what she told people I earned. Sandra was now 20, engaged to a man named Emeka from a good family, and the wedding preparations filled the compound with noise, laughter, and the kind of excitement that forgets other people exist. I was expected to help with everything: the cooking, the cleaning, the running of errands. I was expected to be invisible at the front and indispensable at the back. And then, one afternoon, Sandra came to me with a dress. Not just any dress, her wedding dress. She said, "I want you to alter it. It is too long and I need you to fix the zipper. Fix it." She did not say please. She never said please. I took the dress. I held it in my hands. I felt the weight of it. And I smiled. Not because I was happy to help her, because I had just seen in my mind the shape of what was coming. Let me tell you something about weddings in our town. They are not just celebrations, they are announcements. They say, "Look at us, we have arrived." Everyone who is anyone comes. Relatives from faraway villages, business partners, church members, neighbors who have been watching from their windows for years. A wedding is a stage, and on that stage, everything is visible. Sandra's wedding was set for the 3rd Saturday in November. The compound had been transformed, white canopies, rented chairs, colored bulbs strung from the mango tree to the gate. The smell of jollof rice and peppered fish floated over the entire street. Women arrived in full makeup and expensive lace. Men arrived in matching agbada. It was, by every measure, a beautiful day. I woke up that morning before 4 a.m. and I walked. I arranged chairs, I set tables, I helped the caterers carry pots, I arranged flowers. I did all of this quietly, invisibly, the way I had done everything for years. But before all of that, at 2 in the morning, when the compound was sleeping, I had gone to Sandra's room and done one final thing to that wedding dress. I want you to hear this clearly. I did not damage the dress. I did not tear it or ruin it or sabotage it the way an angry, unthinking person might. I am smarter than that. What I did was precise, surgical, invisible to the eye until the exact wrong moment. The zipper I had been asked to fix, I fixed it. And then I adjusted the stopper at the very top so that under the pressure of dancing, of moving, of a full afternoon of wedding activity, it would give way, silently, completely, without warning. I also knew something nobody else in that compound knew. I knew that Sandra, who was always showing off, had told Emeka's family that the wedding dress was designed and sewn entirely by a famous designer from Lagos. She had said this at the introduction ceremony. She had said it again at the pre-wedding dinner. She had shown the dress to Emeka's mother and his aunties and said, "This is original, not local. This is class." She did not know that her dress had been touched, carefully, thoroughly by the hands of the girl from nowhere. The ceremony was beautiful at first. Sandra walked down the aisle and she was, I will admit, stunning. The dress fitted her perfectly. Emeka cried when he saw her. Mama Rose wept with pride. The photographer was everywhere. The guests were clapping. I sat at the back near the kitchen entrance and I watched. The reception began. Sandra danced. She danced the way people dance when they know everyone is watching them. Big dramatic movements, arms raised, waist rolling. She pulled Emeka up and they danced together and the crowd was cheering. And then, in the middle of the dance floor, surrounded by 200 guests, captured on 3 different phone cameras, the zipper of Sandra's famous designer from Lagos wedding dress split open from her waist to her neck. The dress did not fall completely, but it gaped wide open, and Sandra, who had been spinning with her arms raised, did not realize immediately. She kept dancing for 3 more seconds. 3 seconds is a very long time when 200 people are watching. The gasp from the crowd was the sound of something irreversible. Sandra's hands flew to her back. Her face, I can still see it, went from joy to confusion to horror in the space of one breath. Mama Rose, who had been sitting at the high table, stood up. Someone screamed. Someone laughed, quickly silenced. A bridesmaid rushed forward with a shawl. But it was done. The cameras had seen it. The phones had captured it. The story had already been written in the air above that dance floor. And in the chaos that followed, while everyone rushed to help or to whisper or to pretend they had not seen, nobody noticed the girl from nowhere slipping out through the kitchen entrance. I walked to Mama Ezine's shop. She was waiting for me. She had a cup of tea on the table and a document beside it. I sat down. I looked at the document. It was a lease agreement for a shop space 3 times bigger than hers on the main road. Mama Ezine said, I told you from the beginning that you were not a house girl. You are a designer. She had gone to the bank. She had put down the deposit herself. She had put my name on the lease. My name, Ada. Not the girl from nowhere. Not house girl. Not Ade, come here. Ada. Fashion designer. Owner. I looked at the document for a long time. Then I looked at Mama Ezine. And the tears that came were not the kind I had swallowed for years. These were different. These were the tears of someone who had walked a very long road and finally seen the gate. But what happened when I walked back into that compound that evening? What Mama Rose did, what Sandra said, and what I said back. That part of the story I have not told you yet. When I walked back through the gate of Mama Rose's compound that evening, the wedding guests were gone. The caterers were packing their pots. The rented chairs were being stacked. The colored bulbs still hung from the mango tree, but nobody had switched them on, and they hung dark and limp in the evening air. The compound felt like the morning after a battle. Sandra was inside. I could hear her crying. The loud, humiliated kind of crying that comes from a wound you cried, not to the heart. Mama Rose was with her, talking in a low, soothing voice. Emeka had gone home with his family, and from the murmurs I caught as I passed the window, the conversation between both families was not a kind one. Some of Emeka's aunties had begun asking questions, not about the dress, but about Sandra, about her character, about what kind of family raises a girl who lies about small things. Because if she lies about a dress, what else does she lie about? I went to my room, the small storeroom with the damp wood smell and the raffia mat on the floor. I stood in it for the last time. I looked at it, really looked at it. The cracked wall, the single nail where I hung my one good wrapper, the Bible with the torn pages that had belonged to my mother. I packed everything I owned into one bag. It did not take long. I had never been allowed to own much. I carried the bag to the parlor and set it by the door. Mama Rose came out of Sandra's room and stopped when she saw me standing there with my bag. Ada, where are you going? Her voice had a new tone in it. Confusion. Something close to concern, but the kind of concern a person feels not for you, but for themselves, because she had just seen me for the first time. In her mind, something was shifting. The girl from nowhere was standing at the door with a packed bag and a face that did not ask for permission. "I am leaving," I said. "Leaving?" She almost laughed. "Where will you go? You have nothing." And there it was again, that word, nothing. I reached into the front pocket of my bag and I brought out two things. I placed them on the table in front of her. The first was the lease agreement for my new shop on the main road, already signed, already paid. The second was a folded newspaper, 3 weeks old. Inside was a full-page feature on young designers changing fashion in the region. There was a photograph of me standing in Mama Izine's shop, surrounded by fabric. The article called me a rising talent. It gave my name, my full name, Ada Okoye. Mama Rose stared at both items on the table. I picked them back up, put them in my bag, and zipped closed. "I have been working in this compound for 6 years," I said. "You collected my wages, you told people I was your house girl, you watched your daughter push me down that staircase and you said nothing. You gave me a storeroom and told me I should be grateful." My voice was steady. This surprised even me. I had expected to shake. I did not shake. "I am not angry at you anymore," I said. "I want you to know that, because where I am going, there is no room for what happened in this compound. But I also want you to know I remember every day, every single one." I picked up my bag. I picked up my mother's Bible. Sandra appeared in the doorway of the corridor. Her eyes were swollen. Her hair was undone. She looked, for the first time in all the years I had known her, small. We looked at each other. I did not speak to her. I had nothing to say to Sandra. Everything I needed to say had already been said on that dance floor by 200 witnesses on camera. I walked out through the gate of that compound and I did not look back. 6 months later, my shop on the main road had a waiting list of 12 weeks for bridal orders. I hired 3 girls to help me sew, all of them from difficult places, all of them learning, all of them paid fairly. I bought myself a bed, a real one, with a proper mattress. The first night I slept on it, I lay there for a long time, just feeling the softness beneath me, and I thought of my mother. I told her, in the quiet way you speak to people who are no longer there but are somehow still listening, I told her I was okay now. I told her she could rest. Mama Izine became my second mother, my real mother, the kind you choose. And Sandra, Emeka's family eventually called off the engagement, not immediately. These things take time. But the questions that started on that wedding day did not stop. And when more questions came, more truths came with them. Within the year, Sandra and Mama Rose had moved out of the big compound because they could no longer afford it. The last I heard, Sandra was struggling to finish a polytechnic program and Mama Rose was selling pepper soup from a small stall near the motor park. I did not celebrate this, I want you to understand. There is a kind of person who sees the fall of their enemy and throws a party. I am not that person. Because the thing I learned, the real lesson, the one that matters, is this. You cannot build a life out of someone else's ruin. You can only build it from your own hands. What broke me on that staircase was not Sandra's push. It was 6 years of believing that because I had nothing, I was nothing. The staircase just cracked me open, and through that crack, eventually, the light got in. The old woman at the gate was not a coincidence. She was a reminder that help comes, but it comes to those who are still standing, even when standing means pulling yourself up from a concrete floor with a bleeding head and going back to iron someone else's clothes. You keep standing, you keep your mind open, you receive the help when it comes, and then you walk like your life depends on it, because it does. I am Ada. I was pushed down 12 stairs and left on a cold floor, and I built an empire from the bottom of those stairs. If Ada's story moved something inside you, subscribe right now and ring that notification bell, because every week we bring you stories from the African soil. We will see you in the next story.